The Nullification Crisis by Casey Pollock, Madison Holland, Emma Batch, Willow Davis, and Hannah Ward.
Nullification is the state's rights to a doctrine that says that they can refuse to recognize or enforce a federal law passed by the United States Congress.
The Nullification Crisis began with the Tariff of 1828. In order to sabotage the Adams administration, Jackson's campaign composed a tariff to increase the prices of manufactured items. Because New England was a center for manufacturing, they benefited. However, the South did not and opposed it, especially South Carolina. The following is a telegram transaction between Jackson and Calhoun.
Mr. John Calhoun, when I was elected into office, there was a tariff on the table in Congress. This law has now been passed, and the New England region will now be taxing you all more for their manufactured goods. This means that the New England region is going to grow, so this is a very positive thing.
Because of the tariff passed by Congress, Southern economy is now stalled. This is unfair to us in the South. Because now the things we need to buy in the North are too expensive for us to afford. We don't want to rely on the North, because that gives the North power to destroy us.
Because of the tariff of 1828, the South Carolina Ordinance happened. Southerners were angry about the tariff because they believed it was unconstitutional and risked the abolishment of slavery. Because their markets were based on slavery and its successfulness, a state legislator made a pamphlet called the South Carolina Exposition, in which John Calhoun quotes,
"No government based on the naked principle that the majority ought to govern, however true the maxim in its proper sense and under proper restrictions, ever preserved its liberty even for a single generation. The history of all has been the same: injustice, violence, and anarchy, succeeded by the government of one or a few, under which people seek refuge from the more oppressive despotism of the majority. Those governments only which provide checks, which limit and restrain within proper bounds the power of the majority, have had a prolonged existence and been distinguished for virtue, power, and happiness." The South Carolina Exposition, December 19th, 1828.
Because of the relentless South Carolinians, Jackson decided to create a force bill. The force bill would allow Jackson to send an army to South Carolina to enforce the new laws. Although this bill was not necessary, it was an attempt to establish the dominance of the federal government. Andrew Jackson quotes,
Our Union, it must be preserved.
South Carolina threatened to nullify the laws and secede from the Union if the tariffs were not repealed.
Our Union next to our liberty most dear, may we always remember that it can only be preserved by distributing equally the benefits and the burdens of the Union.
Jackson quotes,
"I consider, then, the power to annul a law of the United States assumed by one state incompatible with the existence of the Union, contradicted expressly by the letter of the Constitution, unauthorized by its spirit, inconsistent with every principle on which it was founded, and destructive of the great object for which it was formed."
The next event during the Nullification Crisis was the Webster-Hayne debate. Robert Hayne was a member of the Senate when another senator, Samuel Foote from Connecticut, proposed a law that restricted the sale of Western land that was still owned by the federal government.
Hello. Hello, I have a proposal for you. Oh, okay, let's hear what you have to say.
When Thomas Benton of Missouri found out about this proposition, he asked the South to join forces with him against this proposal. He felt that this proposal would restrict Western expansion and therefore lead to much more power in the West. Hearing this, Hayne realized the potential benefits of an alliance with the West and quickly said yes.
Would the South like to join forces with us?
Yes.
In order to justify his reasons behind the alliance, he ended up in a heated debate between himself and Daniel Webster, who was pro-strict Western expansion and also a very talented debater.
Mr. Webster, I am correct.
If the states were allowed to nullify laws, the principles of nationalism in the U.S. would be destroyed.
Are you saying that I'm against unity in the U.S.?
Yes, I win.
During the debate, Hayne was forced to address the issue of nullification. Webster thought that if states were allowed to nullify laws, the principles of nationalism in the U.S. would be destroyed, saying that he was fighting for unity, whereas Hayne was not. Hayne could not recover from this despite his attempts to bring up the interpretation of the Constitution, and he lost support. Although this was a brutal fight, Webster won in the end. Following President Jackson's nullification proclamation, which led to the force bill, which we have already discussed, John Calhoun, who has resigned from the vice presidency, went to his friend Henry Clay to help him find a solution to the latest outrage from Jackson. Clay then came up with what he called a compromise proposal. He proposed that the tariffs placed on South Carolina would be reduced up to 10% over the duration of 8 years. This compromise tariff was passed in 1833, and though it wasn't exactly what the Southerners were looking for, it was better than the force bill or anything else from Jackson at this point. Further, the South Carolinian people did have a little bit of victory because they were able to nullify the force bill following the approval of the compromise tariff.
Robert Rimini, in the conclusion of Andrew Jackson, states, "To such an invocation of Jackson on behalf of the democratic ideal, one can only say, oh, Amen, O God, Amen." McCann states, as of the early presidents, Jackson is in many ways the most like us. In the saga of the Jackson presidency, one marked by both democratic triumphs and racist tragedies, we can see the American character in formation and in action. To understand him in his time helps us to understand America's perennially competing impulses. Jackson's life and work and the nations he protected and preserved were shaped by the struggle between grace and rage, generosity and violence, justice and cruelty.
In conclusion, in regards to the nullification crisis, Jackson wavered in his defense of the Constitution, did not defend the people, especially in the South, very well, as seen by the force bills, etc., and he did defend nationalism well because of his attempts to keep South Carolina as a part of the Union.
Andrew Jackson says, "After 8 years as president, I have only 2 regrets, that I have not shot Henry Clay or hanged John C. Calhoun."